Welcome to Sleep Workshop. It's good to have you here tonight. History often feels like a well-told story. Empires rise, kings fall, discoveries unfold. But beneath that polished surface, strange fragments remain, artifacts that defy explanation, maps that chart unknown lands, events that refuse simple answers. Tonight we drift into these forgotten corners, into stories that sit quietly between fact and mystery. Not to solve them, but to let their quiet questions carry us toward rest. Let your breath slow, let your thoughts soften, and allow the mysteries to guide you gently into sleep. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? And if you enjoy these journeys, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share the mystery with others who need a peaceful night. Under soft cathedral light, a faint face emerges from old linen, challenging every answer we thought we had. We begin in the silent nave of St. John the Baptist Cathedral in Turin. Marble columns rise like frozen pillars of dawn, their fluted surfaces veined with centuries of candle smoke. Vaulted arches melt upward into amethyst gloom, while 30-foot tapestries hush the echo of passing cars outside. At the center, behind temperature-regulated glass, lies the Shroud of Turin, a 21-foot strip of herringbone flax whose threads once drank Mediterranean sun, wind-blown pollen, and field dust from the Po Valley. At first glance, the fabric appears ordinary, time-creased, water-stained, scorched by an old fire. Yet as your eyes adjust, a spectral front and back imprint of a man rises from the weave, pigment-free yet startlingly precise, as though light itself once knelt and left an echo. Microscopy, spectroscopy, radiography, the whole armory of modern science has visited. In 1898, amateur photographer Secondo Pia exposed a glass plate and nearly dropped it when the negative revealed a perfect positive portrait. Newspapers from New York to Calcutta printed the ghostly face. Physicists such as Yves Delage argued authenticity in the Sorbonne, while skeptics dismissed pious fraud. In 1978, the STIRP Consortium hauled X-ray fluorescence rigs and sticky tape, samplers inside gathering fibrils thinner than spider silk. They found no brush strokes, no binder molecules, no directional pigment, only surface oxidation, shading barely a micron deep. Beyond the bulletproof glass, Turin's morning mutters, like distant surf. Espresso machines hiss foam, bicycle bells chime along cobblestones, and the Alps glow rose gold above rooftops studded with ochre chimneys. Inside, time thickens. Imagine every linen fibril as a silver strand of spider silk drifting through. Still air. The more closely you observe, the more gravity loosens its grip on thought. The cathedral becomes a patient lung exhaling calm. Could an ancient burst of radiant energy etch an anatomically perfect negative? Or is the cloth a masterpiece of medieval theater? Paolo Di Lazzaro of Italy's INEA Research Center fired ultraviolet X-Samer lasers at raw flax. A 5/1000th of a second pulse browned the surface, reproducing the shroud's tone without penetrating deeper than 2 microfibers. Yet the power required equaled several modern plants blazing at once. Not exactly a village workshop trick. Others suggest amide vapors from a corpse reacting with carbohydrate residues to produce a Maillard caramel crust. But lab attempts yield blurry halos, not anatomical precision. Carbon-14 tests in 1988 dated threads between 1260 and 1390. Yet, those came from a charred corner later patched with cotton. Textile chemist Raymond Rogers found gum arabic there, contamination enough to skew the clock. Step closer in imagination. Across the cloth glistened tiny rust-brown ovals identified as human blood, type AB, rich in porphyrins that fluoresce under high-energy light. Forensic pathologist Pierre Barbet traced flow patterns consistent with gravity on a crucified body. Digital physiognomist Isabel Pichek mapped cranial proportions and found minimal distortion. Grayscale levels encode depth the way a topographic map encodes height. NASA engineers using a VP8 analyzer converted brightness to vertical relief and watched cheekbones lift, eye sockets deepen, lips swell into three-dimensional form. The linen behaves less like paint, more like a hologram frozen in cellulose. Historical breadcrumbs scatter across parchment. Reliable mention surfaces in 1355 when Knight Geoffroy de Charny exhibited the cloth at Léré, France, drawing pilgrims by the cartload. Margaret de Charny later pawned it to rescue her husband. Duke Louis of Savoy reclaimed it, parading the cloth over mountain passes in a silver casket guarded by halberdiers. In 1506, Pope Julius II approved a special feast day. Disaster struck in 1532. Silver reliquary braces melted in a chapel fire, branding the folded shroud with mirror image burn holes, later patched by Poor Clare nuns. During World War II, it hid in a Benedictine monastery near Montevergine while bombers prowled Turin skies. Each migration etched new creases, yet the image endured, unpainted, unresolved, unforgotten. Spectral chemist Giulio Fanti suspended linen filaments between sapphire prisms, firing Raman lasers that proved oxidation dehydration of hemicellulose rather than pigment. Physicist John Jackson's thermal model suggested collimated radiation streaming perpendicular to body surfaces, shading in inverse proportion to cloth to skin distance. Physics no brush could duplicate. Critics test bas-relief statues, acid etching, powdered embossing, yet none recreate the shroud's spatial gradient plus chemical signature. Recent work sharpened the puzzle. A 2022 neutron radiography study from Italy's National Institute for Nuclear Physics observed faint baryon density shadows aligning with hemoglobin breakdown. In 2024, the Swiss light source synchrotron pivoted a postage stamp fragment under coherent X-rays, detecting nanoscopic microcracks only in external carbohydrate films. These fractures match high-temperature dehydration, yet vanillin loss isotopes imply age beyond medieval. Meanwhile, Padua University's machine learning lab trained a diffusion model on gigapixel scans, generating probability maps of print irregularities. The result, stochastic noise clusters typical of natural decay, not artificial brushwork. The deeper researchers dig, the louder the cloth shrugs. Cultural ripples multiply. 4 million pilgrims queued for the Millennium Exposition in 2000, streaming under white tinsel tents along Via Roma. In 2025, an augmented reality app let schoolchildren overlay the shroud on classroom walls, toggling spectral filters with thumb swipes. Poets tuck its paradox into stanzas, video game designers embed it as a quest relic, and neural artists feed its grayscale into generative models that birth uncanny faces faintly familiar yet unnamed. Textile conservator Mechthild Fleury-Lemberg cites 1st century Syrian loom patterns. Historian Charles Freeman sees medieval passion plays. Both arguments ring plausible, neither silences the debate. The cloth remains an object so indifferent it welcomes every theory, like a blank page that already carries a story. Picture now a scanning electron micrograph zooming deeper. Cellulose tubes ridged like bamboo, nanoscopic caramelization tinting only outer walls. Each increase in magnification moves slower than the last, sinking to the steady taper of your pulse. Outside, stained glass windows rinse interior stones with shifting cobalt and vermilion. Somewhere, a choir rehearsal fades, leaving the nave, wrapped in a hush thick enough to feel on your skin. Even dust motes choose slower spirals here, obeying currents we rarely notice until stillness magnifies them. History breathes between warp and weft, asking which is stranger, the image itself or our relentless desire to parse its silence. Gradually, the sacristan dims chandeliers. Hydrotherm gauges hover at 45% humidity, the optimum for lignin stability. Argon-rich shutters seal the reliquary. No tourists linger, yet the linen continues its quiet barter with entropy, surrendering a handful of glycosidic bonds each decade while collecting fresh hypotheses like coins in an alms dish. Some nights you might fancy the image brightening, as though recalling the flash that birthed it. Other nights it seems to recede, a memory reluctant to be retold. Either illusion works the same spell. It slows heartbeats and broadens curiosity. Final candle at the high altar, Gutters exhales a thin ribbon of smoke and vanishes. Cathedral bronze doors sigh shut, echo pooling in cloisters. Beyond those doors, cobbled alleys glitter with evening drizzle. And somewhere, a tram clanks across the Po River Bridge. Our path tilts southwest now toward rain-drenched jungles where quartz-clear skulls lie under roots and vines, artifacts rumored to sing under moonlight, promising questions carved in crystal. Linen folds away. Translucent bone-glass eyes begin to glow. Somewhere in tangled jungle shade, a glimmer of quartz winks like frozen lightning, daring us to decide if it is a miracle or a mirror. Long before drones mapped Central America, Maya trail cutters spoke of stone heads shaped like time-worn gods. Yet, the best-known crystal skull appears on a bright spring morning in 1924, when teenager Anna Mitchell Hedges explores the collapsed interior of the ancient city of Lubantun, Belize. Inside a limestone crevice packed with leaf litter, she notices a gleam that refuses to be dirtied. Workers pry loose a life-size cranium carved from a single block of optically clear quartz, jaw detached but perfectly hinged. Local legend calls it the Skull of Doom, said to weep fog, flash inner fire, and whisper in dreams. The story spreads faster than a monsoon river. Museums request it, mystics revere it, skeptics raise eyebrows. The skull begins its slow orbit through world fairs, parapsychology conferences, and late-night radio broadcasts. In laboratories, the skull behaves like a reluctant celebrity. Smithsonian research microscopist Dr. Jane McLaren Walsh bathes its surface in high-angle light and sees microscopic rotary wheel lines, evidence of 19th century mechanical carving. She runs X-ray diffraction to confirm the quartz grew in Brazil or Madagascar, far from Mesoamerican quarries. Electron microprobe analysis finds traces of barium oxide polish compound developed in Germany in the 1800s. Her verdict: Victorian craft marketed as pre-Columbian wonder, but the allure refuses to die. Spiritual healers claim the skull changes, temperature under prayer. Sensitives say it pulses like a slow heartbeat when lunar light touches the brow ridge. Just north, in Mexico City's National Museum of Anthropology, another quartz cranium rests under low-humidity glass. Unlike the Mitchell Hedges piece, this skull shows frosted inclusions, cloudy imperfections that scatter gallery LEDs into pastel halos. Curators list it as Aztec, though carbon dust in mounting wax suggests a European cabinet of curiosities. Visitors gather anyway, magnetized by the paradox of human face rendered in rock that remembers nothing. Over years, millions project hopes, fears, and cosmic questions onto its blank stare until the gallery seems louder than traffic outside. Quartz may be silent, yet when light tunnels through it, whole centuries start whispering into fraction, patterns that only patience can translate. Scientifically, quartz is piezoelectric. Compress it, and electrons slide, generating voltage. Engineers grow synthetic quartz for spacecraft oscillators because its lattice rarely drifts even in spaces deep cold. Mystics transpose that stability onto consciousness, insisting crystal skulls store memory the way silicon chips hold code. In 2003, physicist Dr. Marcel Vogel of IBM fame directs laser beams into a replica skull and measures anomalous double refraction. His demonstration ends with a calmly spoken idea. Intent influences lattice symmetry. Journal referees roll their eyes, yet souvenir shops in Sedona sell out within weeks. Archaeologists prefer verifiable context. They cite lack of excavation records, pointing out every ancient skull surfaced through art dealers in the busy second half of the 19th century when Europe's fascination with lost civilizations peaked. Dr. Jaime Alway studies groove, cross-sections under scanning electron microscopy. His images show granular pulverization along cut walls, matching modern grinding wheels, not flaked obsidian or sandstone drill bits. Chemical residue reveals diamond paste, available only after the Industrial Revolution. These findings, published in the Journal of Archaeological Science in 2022, push nearly every publicized skull out of antiquity and into collectors' parlors. Still, even debunked artifacts can teach. Gemologists measure Mohs hardness, determining that quartz scratches at level 7, whereas common steel rests at 4.5. That toughness fosters legends. No ancient lapidary could carve this, people say. Yet artisans at Idar Oberstein, Germany, demonstrate multi-axis lathes that sculpt full skulls in under 1 month. They invite cameras, show coolant jets washing swarf, let visitors run fingers across fine cranial sutures produced by silicon carbide burrs. Mystique bends, but does not break. Tourists still feel a hush when the polished piece faces them eye to eye. Occasionally, science hands the myth a surprising gift. A 2024 Raman spectroscopy survey of the British Museum skull reveals trace pigments, mercury sulfide, malachite, hematite, embedded in microfractures. These pigments match face-painting palettes found at Teotihuacan. How did post-industrial Europeans smear Mesoamerican cosmetics into grooves invisible to the naked eye? Curators now wonder if an earlier rough quartz head once sat in a Mexican shrine before 19th century polishers shaved it slick. The skull, in effect, becomes a palimpsest, colonial intervention, overriding indigenous devotion, leaving a hybrid object both authentic and counterfeit at once. Dr. Claudia Brittenham of the University of Chicago describes such objects as testimonial mirrors. In her 2025 lecture, she states, "Even forgeries reflect the culture that forges them. They reveal what the modern world wishes the ancient world to have been, transcendental, technological, and willing to converse with us." Audience members scribble while outside a thunderstorm. Lashes campus rooftops. Thunder repeating like distant heartbeat drums. Midnight shifts at the Musée du Quai Branly in Paris add another layer. Guards report optical illusions. When you circle the display case, reflections from 12 fiber optic spotlights appear to animate jaw muscles, creating the hint of a grin as you walk. Optometrists call it specular parallax. Folklorists collect new anecdotes anyway. This living feedback loop between expectation and observation fuels the skull phenomenon more powerfully than any objective trait of quartz. The artifact acts as a stage onto which observers project narrative, then walk away believing the stage spoke first. Some relics gift us data, others gift us questions. Crystal skulls insist on gifting both. And the mind slows down trying to hold them together. Imagine holding one now, edges cool against palms, weight heavier than intuition predicts. Quartz channels, warmth from skin, yet diffuses it slowly, creating a faint sense of pulse. Your own blood mirrors back through a material that crystallized, inside Earth's crust 30 million years before the earliest primates. That temporal vertigo eases thoughts into languid spirals. Whether sculpted in Victorian workshops or jungle sanctuaries, the skull teaches the same lesson. Objects can outlive intentions wandering through epics that rewrite them again and again. As museum lights dim, fiber optic beams fade, leaving only emergency LEDs. Glass cabinets sigh when air handling units lower nighttime humidity. Somewhere in a shipping crate lies another unprovenance skull, its facets frosted, waiting for whichever storyline will rescue it from foam padding. It may rotate beneath a macro lens, emit nothing but refracted glare, yet still recruit new believers hungry for voices in silence. And in that hush, the artifact performs its gentlest labor, letting curiosity adopt the slow cadence of patience, letting speculation glide rather than sprint. In a nearby reading room, scholars leaf through the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible, whose inked demon stares out larger than life. Their lamplight spills across vellum so broad it dwarfs laptops and notebooks. Soon our journey drifts toward that colossal manuscript where a single night's rumored writing challenges endurance, the way quartz challenged lapidary skill. Polished crystal fades. Illuminated parchment begins to glow. If you could trap 1,000 pages of legend between two covers and include the devil himself in the middle, would you dare to turn the first page? Inside a vault in Stockholm, sealed away from sunlight and the restless hum of the city, sits a single book that seems too large for human hands to have made. Its dimensions alone feel unsettling, as though the manuscript was never meant for ordinary men, but for beings of another scale. Nearly 3 feet tall and almost 2 feet wide, this colossal work is known as the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible. Bound in wooden boards covered with elaborately tooled leather, it weighs over 165 pounds, demanding 2 strong individuals merely to lift it safely. But the weight of the book is not merely physical. It carries a legend, an aura thick as fog, drawing countless researchers, skeptics, mystics, and the simply curious into its orbit for centuries. The core of its legend begins not with what's written, but how it was supposedly written. As the tale goes, in the early 13th century, a Benedictine monk in Bohemia committed a crime so severe that his punishment was to be walled up alive, left to suffocate slowly in isolation. In a desperate plea for mercy, he vowed to produce in one night a book so magnificent that it would glorify God and redeem his soul. As midnight approached, his progress hopelessly slow, he turned not to God, but to the devil himself, offering his soul in exchange for completion of the work. By morning, the Codex Gigas was finished. Of course, modern historians dismiss the legend, yet even today, standing before the massive volume, one cannot help but feel its gravity. The legend, regardless of fact, lingers in the air like incense. Every line in this book whispers from another century, but the central figure shouts through time with inked claws and a gaze that never blinks. The Codex Gigas is not simply a Bible. It is an encyclopedia of medieval knowledge. Beyond the entire Latin Vulgate Bible, it contains numerous texts, the works of Flavius Josephus on Jewish history, Isidore of Seville's Etymologia, various medical treatises, exorcism formulas, and even lists of sins with their corresponding penances. This was not simply a book for devotion. It was a compendium of all the world as it was understood at the time, a library bound into a single massive tome. The sheer consistency of handwriting suggests that one scribe likely copied the entire manuscript, probably over decades. Paleographic analysis of the letter forms indicates remarkable uniformity, no signs of aging, fatigue, or changing ink recipes, typically seen in manuscripts written over many years. The script is steady, elegant, and measured, as though the scribe worked under some strange vow of relentless discipline. Even the intricate decorative initials remain consistent across hundreds of pages. The parchment, analyzed chemically in recent decades, consists of calfskin, estimated from approximately 160 animals. Each page, when turned, makes a faint leathery crackle, like ancient leaves falling onto cold stone. The ink, made from gallnuts and iron salts, has aged beautifully, retaining its deep color even after 800 years. But what draws most visitors to Stockholm isn't the text itself, but the haunting image that occupies one full page: the devil. Unlike most medieval illustrations that depict Satan being cast down or tormented, this portrait is bold, almost confrontational. The creature sits upright, framed in a black void, with two red tongues splitting from his mouth, hands raised like a twisted parody of blessing, and clawed feet planted firmly. He is not falling, not trapped, but waiting. His expression is neither mocking nor enraged. It is calm, detached, and eerily patient. On the facing page lies a heavenly city rendered in soft, glowing tones. Scholars often describe this juxtaposition as a deliberate symbolic choice, presenting the reader with both salvation and damnation side by side, forcing them to confront the duality of existence as they physically turn from one to the other. Some books tell stories. This one breathes them, bound by hide and ink, sealed with silence and suspicion. The journey of the Codex Gigas after its creation is as mysterious as its origins. Originally housed in the Benedictine monastery at Podlages, its movements across Europe reflect the turbulence of centuries. The monastery itself was small and poor, far too modest, most scholars argue, to have hosted such a monumental undertaking. Its transfer to Prague placed it in the royal library under Emperor Rudolf II, whose obsession with the occult gave the Devil's Bible a new layer of dark mystique. During the 30 Years' War in 1648, Swedish forces seized the Codex Gigas as part of the spoils of war, along with countless other treasures from Prague Castle. Since then, it has remained in Sweden, becoming one of the National Library's most prized and most unsettling possessions. In the modern era, technological tools have allowed scholars to peer beneath the surface of the pages. Ultraviolet imaging has revealed erased texts beneath some sections, suggesting revisions or lost content. Multispectral scans have exposed faint fingerprints, revealing where the scribe rested his hands, where sweat darkened the edges, where time itself left invisible. Marks, and perhaps most mysterious of all, 12 pages are missing. At some point in its long life, someone deliberately removed these pages. No one knows whether they contained dangerous knowledge, lost gospels, forbidden spells, or simply mistakes. That absence continues to fuel speculation and wonder. Art historians analyzing the Devil's portrait note the anatomical precision of certain details. The arch of the bat-like wings, the proportion of the facial horns, the anatomical structure of the fingers. This was no casual doodle by an unskilled hand, but a careful and intentional act of illustration. Even the symmetry of the figure's proportions has led some to propose mathematical modeling in its creation. Whether symbolic or deliberate remains unknown. Culturally, the Codex Gigas continues to inspire fascination. In recent years, digital recreations have allowed virtual page-turning for global audiences. In 2023, a neural network was trained on high-resolution scans of the manuscript, attempting to predict what the missing pages may have contained. The AI produced curious speculative texts, apocryphal psalms, alternative calendars, even nonsensical lists of angelic names. None can be proven real, yet the very act of speculation reflects humanity's unending hunger to fill the gaps of mystery. As you imagine standing before the sealed glass in Stockholm, the museum's softly humming filtration system maintaining perfect humidity, you feel time slowing. Your gaze locks with the Devil's unblinking stare. The room feels colder, though nothing has changed. A shiver might pass down your spine, not from fear, but from the ancient gravity of unanswered questions surrounding you. And in that pause, your mind drifts, not toward terror, but toward contemplation. As the heavy oak cabinet of the Codex Gigas gently closes, its brass hinges creaking softly, we turn now toward a different kind of mystery, not etched in ink, but walked upon muddy roads by thousands of young feet. We drift toward the haunting path of the Children's Crusade, a movement shrouded in innocence, tragedy, and shadows lost to time. There are moments in human history when facts vanish and only haunting echoes remain. The year was 1212. Europe groaned beneath the weight of broken promises and broken crusades. Jerusalem remained distant, out of reach for kings who had spilled oceans of blood across endless deserts. The voices of knights and generals had grown hoarse with failure. But into this wearied silence rose a whisper, faint at first but destined to swell into a storm. A new crusade was taking form, not by soldiers hardened by battle, but by the soft voices of children. In the small village of Cloy, France, a shepherd boy named Stephen declared that Christ himself had appeared to him, delivering a divine letter, instructing him to lead a crusade fueled not by swords, but by innocence. Across the continent, in Cologne, Germany, another boy named Nicholas claimed a vision. He too preached that purity could succeed where steel had failed. The message spread quickly. It was as if the entire continent, exhausted and starved for, hope was waiting for something, anything that promised salvation once again. Word traveled from village to village. Sermons ignited hearts. Mothers and fathers watched in stunned silence as their children gathered wooden crosses, sang hymns, and marched toward a destiny none of them could possibly understand. The numbers swelled. Contemporary chroniclers recorded vast multitudes, tens of thousands, perhaps exaggerated by the awe of observers. More conservative estimates place the number between $15,000 to $25,000 across the two groups combined. The participants were not exclusively children. Peasants, beggars, displaced laborers, and outcasts joined the swelling processions. But many were indeed children, some as young as 7 years old, stepping away from home and into history. They carried no swords, no shields. Only their faith shielded them from a world that would offer no mercy. Their journey began with conviction, but quickly became an ordeal of unimaginable suffering. Marching on foot across hundreds of miles, they crossed sun-scorched plains where the earth itself cracked beneath the summer heat. They waded through rivers fed by melting mountain snow, where icy water numbed their bare legs. Thick forests loomed around them, hiding wild animals and lurking bandits who preyed upon the weak. Food was scarce. Disease moved through their ranks like a silent predator, striking without warning. Many fell ill, weakened by malnutrition, infections, and untreated wounds. Some were abandoned along the roads, too weak to continue. The stronger children pushed forward, driven by hope or by fear of turning back, as they entered towns and villages. Along the way, reactions varied. Some locals offered shelter, food, or prayers. Others recoiled in suspicion, uncertain whether these processions were holy or heretical. The church itself grew uneasy. Pope Innocent III, the same pope who had sanctioned previous crusades, issued warnings against unauthorized movements. Bishops attempted to intervene, but the processions had taken on a momentum of their own. For Stephen's French followers, the destination was Marseille. There they believed the sea itself would part for them, allowing passage to the Holy Land as it had for Moses and the Israelites. For days they gathered along the shoreline, singing and praying, waiting for the miracle that would not come. The Mediterranean remained silent, its waves unmoved by their hymns. Then appeared two merchants, Hugh the Iron and William the Pig, whose names would be cursed for generations. They offered 7 ships, promising to carry the children to Jerusalem. Grateful and desperate, the children boarded the vessels, their hopes shining as bright as the sun above. But the voyage became a nightmare. 2 of the ships were lost to storms, swallowed whole by the Mediterranean. The others reached the North African coast, not the Holy Land, but the thriving slave markets of Tunis and Alexandria. There, many children were sold into slavery, scattered across distant lands, their fates sealed in foreign tongues. Some accounts suggest a handful survived, but most disappeared entirely, their voices drowned beneath the waves. Nicholas's German group suffered, no less. Their journey south led them into the treacherous terrain of the Alps. High mountain passes choked with snow and thin air drained their strength. Dozens perished from exposure. Some turned back, others pressed onward, only to find themselves stranded in Genoa. Without support or ships, their dreams collapsed into silence. Some were absorbed into monasteries or taken in by compassionate locals. A few wandered endlessly, fading into the anonymity of medieval Europe. Their crusade was not ended by swords but by betrayal, hunger, and silence. For centuries, historians have struggled to untangle truth from legend. Was this truly a crusade of children? The Latin term pueri, used in contemporary sources, could mean children, but also the powerless, a reflection of the poverty and desperation of Europe's lower classes. Some scholars suggest that the entire event may have been a collection of spontaneous, loosely connected movements rather than a single, organized crusade. The absence of physical evidence haunts the story. No mass graves have been uncovered, no monuments were built to mark their passage. The children's crusade remains largely invisible to archaeology, surviving instead through fragmented chronicles and contradictory reports. In the 20th and 21st centuries, historians such as Dr. Gary Dixon have devoted their careers to reconstructing the event. Dixon suggests that the crusade may have been born from a perfect storm of religious hysteria, economic collapse, and natural disasters that destabilized Europe. The medieval warm period had given way to climate fluctuations that devastated crops. Starvation pushed many to the brink. The failures of previous crusades shattered the faith of adults. But in children, hope remained unbroken and dangerously naive. The Church feared these movements precisely because they were unpredictable. The papacy relied on tightly controlled, crusading efforts sanctioned and overseen. But the Children's Crusade emerged outside this hierarchy, chaotic, unsanctioned, and impossible to stop. The children listened not to popes or kings, but to boys who claimed to speak for God directly. Some of the chronicles that survive are laced with moral warning, portraying the Children's Crusade as a tragic consequence of misguided piety. Others frame it as a cautionary tale against false prophets. But perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: their disappearance was so total that even history itself cannot fully trace their footsteps. The image lingers, barefoot children walking toward distant shores, eyes lifted to a sky that offered them no miracles. Their songs, once carried on mountain winds and across sunlit fields, dissolved into silence. No enemy army defeated them. It was hunger, treachery, and indifference that did what no sword ever could. And so, as their voices fade into the vast emptiness of forgotten shores, we turn now to a different kind of enigma. Not footsteps, but ink. Not hymns, but coastlines. A map drawn long before its time. The mystery of Piri Reis awaits. Sometimes a single piece of ancient parchment can challenge everything we think we know about discovery, exploration, and the fragile timeline of history itself. The story of the Piri Reis Map does not begin on the deck of an exploring ship, nor in the courtroom of monarchs dividing the world between them. It does not begin with conquistadors or papal decrees, but in the quieter halls of scholarship, far from the noisy ambitions of Europe's colonial empires. It begins in 1513, within the labyrinthine streets of Constantinople, a city of gold. Domes and winding alleys where merchants whispered in dozens of languages, where sailors drank under minarets, and where the wisdom of conquered libraries lingered beneath Ottoman banners. Here, inside a small chamber heavy with the scent of parchment and ink, an admiral named Piri Reis unrolled a piece of gazelle skin upon which he would inscribe one of the most haunting enigmas in cartographic history. The map he produced is not large, only a surviving fragment remains, roughly 90 centimeters by 65. But on this small piece of hide, Piri managed to compress an entire world. Coastlines curl with astonishing precision, curling like ribbons against the oceans. Known continents appear alongside stretches of land no man of his time should have known. The map breathes with confidence, as though drawn not by a man peering into the unknown, but by one transcribing long-held secrets. Piri Reis was more than a naval commander. Trained under his uncle, Kemal Reis, he grew into a master navigator, cartographer, and scholar. He understood not just the art of sailing, but the mathematics of currents, the language of stars, and the caution required when truth was scattered across many conflicting sources. He stood at the nexus of Ottoman power, absorbing knowledge that flowed through Constantinople from the east and the west alike. Piri did not invent his map. He compiled it layer upon layer as a puzzle built from lost fragments of forgotten knowledge. Along the edges of his map, Piri left detailed notes in careful Ottoman Turkish. His words remain preserved, like quiet whispers of testimony, speaking across the centuries. He wrote that his map was constructed using approximately 20 source charts. Some were Islamic world maps, some were Portuguese charts obtained from prisoners or merchants. But one source stood out among the rest. Maps from the time of Alexander, he wrote, and a map from Columbus. This admission has sparked debates spanning hundreds of years. Had Piri Reis somehow acquired lost charts connected to Columbus? Did his sources include documents passed down from earlier voyages long forgotten? Or was he copying knowledge that predated even the voyages of Columbus, knowledge kept alive in secret archives or passed orally by navigators whose journeys were never officially recorded? Piri's map captures not just the familiar, but the uncanny. The western coast of Africa is rendered with an accuracy equal to modern maps. The Iberian Peninsula appears precisely proportioned. The northern coast of South America, particularly the curvature of Brazil, matches the true geography astonishingly well for its time. But it is the southern regions of the map, beneath Brazil, that open the door to deep mystery. There, extending beyond South America's tip, lies a massive landmass. Its contours appear eerily similar to the coast of Antarctica. But this should have been impossible. Antarctica was not officially sighted until centuries later. More curious still, the coastline shown by Piri Reis resembles the ice-free outline of Antarctica's subglacial landmass, a feature modern science only uncovered in the 20th century through seismic mapping beneath 2 miles of ice. Did Piri Reis inherit knowledge from civilizations whose very existence we have long forgotten? In the 20th century, American professor Charles Hapgood advanced the radical theory that ancient seafarers may have mapped Antarctica long before recorded history. In his 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, Hapgood proposed that shifts in Earth's crust, known as crustal displacement, could have moved Antarctica thousands of miles from its ancient ice-free position. He suggested that the map preserved echoes of a prehistoric civilization capable of global navigation, a civilization entirely erased by time, war, or cataclysm. Hapgood's ideas caught the attention of no less than Albert Einstein, who wrote a cautious foreword to Hapgood's work, praising the intellectual daring while urging restraint in leaping to conclusions. Still, the scientific community remained deeply skeptical. Critics argued that mapping distortions, copying errors, and simple coincidence better explained the mysterious southern landmass. Yet even as Orthodox scholars dismissed Hapgood, new puzzles surfaced. The map depicts the Amazon River Delta in remarkable detail, despite the fact that Europeans were only beginning to chart that region. The Falkland Islands appear on Piri's map, though European discovery came decades later, and the level of accuracy in latitude placement, particularly along Brazil's coastline, suggests the use of sophisticated measurement techniques far beyond what Europe officially possessed at the time. But the true mystery of the Piri Reis Map is not its existence. It is its sources. Modern analysis suggests that Piri acted as a compiler, integrating diverse sources, each layered with its own distortions and secrets. His map was a composite mosaic. He blended Islamic star maps, European portolan charts, and whispers of pre-Columbian transoceanic voyages that had slipped quietly into myth. Some have speculated whether Piri's maps from Alexander's time referred to surviving Greek charts preserved in Arab libraries after the fall of Alexandria. The Islamic world had long preserved and expanded upon classical knowledge, while Europe stumbled through the medieval fog. Could ancient mariners, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, or Egyptian traders have sailed further than we imagine, their map surviving only as echoes passed down through centuries of oral tradition and scattered archives? The Piri Reis Map survives as a ghost, neither fully belonging to our known history nor fully outside of it. In 2013, advanced multispectral imaging revealed faint underdrawings beneath Piri's visible ink. These hidden layers suggest Piri actively corrected and updated coastlines as new information reached him, balancing fragments of knowledge that sometimes fit and sometimes clashed. His work wasn't mere copying, it was curation under uncertainty. One researcher, Dr. Gregory McIntosh, who conducted perhaps the most thorough modern study of the map, noted, Piri wasn't just a scribe. He was editing a broken conversation between lost civilizations. The more one examines the map, the more it resembles a palimpsest, a manuscript overwritten again and again by many unseen hands. The broader historical context only deepens. The enigma. The early 16th century was an era of fractured global knowledge. Portuguese explorers pushed down the African coastlines. Spanish ships crossed the Atlantic into the Caribbean. But the geopolitical secrecy surrounding these discoveries created great gaps and distortions in public knowledge. Powerful kingdoms closely guarded their navigational secrets. Knowledge was both currency and weapon, traded, stolen, or lost, and yet somehow Piri gathered data that transcended these silos. His work suggests the possibility that certain circles, perhaps Arab navigators, perhaps Genoese merchants, perhaps hidden scholarly sects, preserved maps, observations, or oral histories passed down through generations, long after official records were lost. The Piri Reis Map endures because it refuses to surrender its full story. Today, the remaining fragment of the map rests in the Topkapı Palace Museum in Istanbul. Behind glass and under soft light, visitors approach the curling gazelle skin with hushed reverence. Scholars peer at its delicate ink lines. Tourists stand mesmerized, unsure whether they are viewing an ordinary relic or the surviving fragment of a much deeper mystery. No matter how advanced our imaging tools become, whether multispectral analysis or computer modeling, the map's true origins remain obscured. It is neither an outright forgery nor a simple reflection of its time. It sits somewhere in between, a paradox etched in ink. Some researchers continue to propose more radical theories, that transoceanic contact occurred long before Columbus, that secret voyages by Polynesians, Africans, or other lost mariners touched distant shores centuries earlier than textbooks admit. They point to scattered artifacts, the Antikythera mechanism, which demonstrates forgotten technological sophistication, the Olmec heads of Mesoamerica, whose features suggest cultural blending, and ancient myths of lost lands submerged beneath. rising seas. Yet even for those who dismiss the more extreme claims, the Piri Reis Map demands humility. It reminds us that our historical record is fragile, built on scraps of preserved parchment, crumbling stone, and incomplete testimony, and that what we call known history may simply be what remains after countless fires, floods, wars, and silences erased much of what came before. And so, as the parchment is carefully rolled once again into its vault, the mystery returns to its slumber, unanswered but never forgotten. We leave behind these twisting coastlines and now turn toward an entirely different enigma. Not one written in ink, but in the shuffling feet of hundreds trapped by unseen forces. In 1518, in the narrow streets of Strasbourg, a silent, haunting melody will grip a city. The dancing plague awaits. There are moments in history when the human body becomes a stage for forces no one can fully explain. The year was 1518. In the heart of summer, beneath the towering spires and narrow alleys of Strasbourg, a city then part of the Holy Roman Empire, an event unfolded that would confound scholars for centuries. The sun-baked cobblestone streets. The Rhine River shimmered nearby, carrying merchant ships stacked with spices and silks. The bells of cathedral towers rang faithfully, marking the passage of ordinary days. And then something profoundly unordinary began. A woman stepped into the street and started to dance. She danced without music, without partner, and without rest. Her name was Frau Trophäa, and though no one knows what drove her feet to move that morning, her steps would echo far beyond the city walls. At first, onlookers gathered in quiet curiosity, but as the hours passed and her movements continued, fascination gave way to alarm. By the end of the week, dozens more joined her. Within a month, as chroniclers would record, over 400 people were caught in the grip of a strange compulsion, moving, spinning, swaying, day and night, as if possessed by an invisible rhythm. No melody filled the air, yet their bodies obeyed, a music no ear could hear. The authorities of Strasbourg struggled to understand what was unfolding before their eyes. Physicians and magistrates debated furiously. Some believed the dancers suffered from overheated blood, a popular medical explanation rooted in the ancient theory of humors, which divided the body into balances of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Following the advice of city doctors, the Council of Strasbourg took a radical step. Rather than restrain the dancers, they built wooden stages and cleared open plazas, believing that allowing the afflicted to dance freely might help them exhaust the condition from their bodies. Musicians were hired, drummers beat their rhythms beneath the hot sun. The city, for a time, became an unwilling carnival of restless motion, but the dancers did not stop. Reports describe men and women collapsing from sheer exhaustion, some convulsed as their muscles spasmed uncontrollably, others screamed in agony as their feet bled and their legs failed beneath them. And yet, even while trembling from starvation and dehydration, their bodies continued the relentless, involuntary movements. Witness accounts paint haunting images, children weeping as mothers, spun helplessly, fathers trying to hold their families upright, priests praying furiously as if battling invisible demons. Strasbourg became a theater of human fragility, where willpower surrendered to something deeper, stranger, and unseen. As the weeks passed, deaths began to mount. Heart failure, stroke, exhaustion. The exact toll remains unknown, but the chroniclers speak of dozens perishing beneath the weight of their own bodies' betrayal. Eventually, the council reversed its approach. The dancers were rounded up and transported to the shrine of Saint Vitus, patron saint of dancers and epileptics, whose name would become forever linked to this phenomenon. The afflicted were marched barefoot to a nearby mountaintop chapel where They were prayed over, anointed with holy water, and blessed in desperate attempts to break the spell. Some recovered, some did not. The dancing plague, as it would come to be called, gradually faded, but its mystery remained. Science still searches for answers, yet the riddle of Strasbourg resists every attempt to be neatly contained. In the centuries that followed, scholars proposed dozens of theories to explain the strange epidemic. Each offered part of the puzzle, but none offered the complete solution. One early hypothesis pointed to ergotism, poisoning from ergot, a fungus that infects rye and produces hallucinogenic alkaloids, chemically similar to LSD. Indeed, ergot poisoning had been blamed for other historical outbreaks of mass hallucination. Sufferers experienced convulsions, muscle spasms, hallucinations, and sometimes gangrene from constricted blood vessels. Yet many historians find this theory unsatisfying. Ergot poisoning tends to produce seizures, not coordinated dancing. It disables muscles rather than fuels continuous motion. And importantly, the condition usually spreads through ingestion, which would not explain how entire crowds were afflicted almost simultaneously. Other theories suggest mass hysteria, or what modern psychology terms mass psychogenic illness, a social phenomenon in which psychological stress triggers physical symptoms, spreading like wildfire through communities already primed by fear, hunger, or trauma. Indeed, 1518 was a year of hardship. Strasbourg had suffered famine, political tension, and religious anxiety as the Reformation loomed. Extreme stress could have weakened psychological defenses, leaving the population vulnerable to collective breakdown. In such conditions, the sight of one person dancing uncontrollably might have triggered a kind of contagious mimicry in others. Dr. John Waller, one of the leading modern experts on the event, supports this theory. In his words, "The people of Strasbourg were primed. For trance states, their world was saturated with supernatural fears, with saints and demons lurking behind every misfortune." Waller describes the event as a culturally conditioned response to intense collective anxiety, and yet, even this explanation leaves shadows unlit. Perhaps the dancing plague is not a riddle to be solved, but a mirror reflecting the hidden vulnerabilities of human societies. Some have proposed spiritual or religious interpretations. The Middle Ages were steeped in beliefs about divine punishment, possession, and saintly intervention. The very fact that the city sent dancers to the shrine of St. Vitus reveals how tightly woven superstition and governance were. In medieval Europe, dancing mania outbreaks were not entirely unprecedented. Earlier incidents had occurred in Germany and the Netherlands, sometimes lasting months. The most famous prior case was in Aachen in 1374, when thousands reportedly danced uncontrollably. These outbreaks often arose during periods of social and economic hardship, as if the collective body of society sought a physical release from invisible pressures. Some folklorists draw connections to ancient ritualistic dances, communal movements, designed to ward off plague or appease angry gods. The line between sacred trance and pathological compulsion blurs easily in such contexts. Science, faith, and folklore circle one another endlessly, unable to fully claim ownership of Strasbourg's haunting summer. To this day, no single theory has proven conclusive. The dancing plague remains one of the most perplexing episodes in medical and cultural history, a moment where the boundary between body and mind seemed to dissolve entirely. Modern neurologists have speculated about rare movement disorders, forms of chorea or dystonia, but these usually occur sporadically, not in large coordinated groups. No known pathogen or neurological condition fits the scale and contagious nature of Strasbourg's outbreak. Historians continue to debate whether some elements of the story have been exaggerated over time. The exact death toll is uncertain. Medieval Chroniclers often embellished for moral or religious emphasis. But even stripped of possible exaggeration, the core event remains. For several terrifying weeks, hundreds danced uncontrollably through the streets of Strasbourg, their bodies refusing rest. And now, as we leave behind the trembling dancers and return to the silent streets of Strasbourg, we turn toward an entirely different catastrophe, one not of movement, but of stillness. In the year 536, the sun itself seemed to vanish. Crops failed, snow fell in summer, and what followed has been called the worst year in human history. There are years that quietly pass through history, forgotten and unremarkable. And then there are years that feel like the very earth itself sighed in despair. The year was 536 AD. To those who lived it, it may have felt as though the world itself was unraveling, not with the roar of war, but with the quiet suffocation of light. It was a year when the sun dimmed, the air chilled, and entire civilizations felt the creeping touch of collapse. Historians would later call it the worst year to be alive. Across Europe, Asia, and far beyond, something unprecedented unfolded. Chroniclers from every corner of the known world describe a strange darkness. The Byzantine historian Procopius of Caesarea wrote, "During this year, a most dread portent took place. For the sun gave forth its light without brightness, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse, for the beams it shed were not clear." In China, the Nanqi dynasty annals record that the sun appeared blue, crops failed, and strange frosts blanketed fields in midsummer. In Ireland, monks carefully etched into their annals descriptions of failing harvests and years without bread. What could plunge the world into such chilling dimness? The sky itself dimmed as if some ancient veil had been drawn across the heavens. For centuries, historians puzzled over these strange records, scattered and fragmented, but consistent in their eerie descriptions. No single war, no visible army, no clear enemy had caused this strange global catastrophe. It was nature itself that had turned hostile. In modern times, advances in science provided the first clues. Ice cores drilled deep into Greenland and Antarctica preserved the atmospheric fingerprints of those years. Trapped within ancient ice layers, scientists discovered elevated levels of sulfate aerosols, a clear signature of massive volcanic eruptions. It is now believed that in 536, one or more colossal volcanic events injected vast amounts of sulfur into the stratosphere. These aerosols formed a global haze, reflecting sunlight back into space and cooling the Earth's surface dramatically. The result was what climatologists call a volcanic winter, a sudden sharp drop in global temperatures. Ring data from around the world confirms this chilling shift. Growth rings from Irish oaks, Swedish pines, North American bristlecones, and Chinese cypress trees all show severe stunting during these years. Crops failed on a scale rarely seen. Summer snowfalls were recorded. Famine followed like a silent predator, devouring those who had already lived precariously close to hunger. For 18 months, the world lived beneath a dim, muted sun, and then things grew even worse. While the initial eruption in 536 marked the beginning, the nightmare would extend for nearly a decade. In 540 and 547, two additional volcanic events, possibly from eruptions in El Salvador, Ilopango, or Iceland, further deepened the crisis. The atmosphere remained poisoned with particulates, preventing full recovery. In some regions, temperatures dropped by as much as 2.5 degrees Celsius. That may sound minor, but for agrarian societies already living at the edge of survival, it was catastrophic. Across the Byzantine Empire, grain prices soared. Tax collections collapsed. In Constantinople, political instability grew as the imperial bureaucracy struggled to manage shortages. The Eastern Roman Empire, though still powerful, faced increasing difficulty maintaining its borders as resources dwindled. In Britain, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle makes cryptic mention of strange cold and failed harvests. Archaeological excavations from Scandinavia suggest entire villages were abandoned during this period as Nordic populations collapsed under the weight of hunger. Even the grand cities of the Maya civilization, thousands of miles away in Central America, show archaeological signs of disruption around this period, massive shifts in population, temple construction halting, and societal stress mounting. Though causation remains debated, it hints at the global nature of this disaster. And then came death, not from hunger alone, but from plague. Just as the world began stumbling from volcanic disaster, a second horror arrived, the Plague of Justinian. First appearing around 541 AD, this devastating pandemic swept across the Mediterranean basin, devastating cities from Egypt to Constantinople, from Syria to Italy. Modern DNA analysis of ancient remains suggests the disease was caused by Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium responsible for the later Black Death of the 14th century. The weakened state of populations already ravaged by famine and malnutrition allowed the plague to spread unchecked. Procopius described the horror. There was a pestilence by which the whole human race came near to being annihilated. At its peak, Constantinople may have seen as many as 5,000 deaths per day. Some estimates suggest that nearly half of the population of the Eastern Roman Empire perished. Trade routes broke down, armies disbanded, fields went unplanted. The empire's ambitious plans for reconquest of the West faltered. Humanity stood at the edge, not because of war, but because nature, in its indifference, had turned every breath into a struggle. The psychological weight of these years cannot be overstated. To the people living through them, this was not a natural disaster in the way we might describe it today. For them, the sky dimming, the crops dying, and the plague spreading were signs of divine wrath, cosmic punishment, or demonic forces unleashed upon the earth. In Northern Europe, legends of Fimbul Winter, a long, bitter winter that precedes the Norse apocalypse of Ragnarok, may echo dim memories of this time. Medieval chroniclers spoke of a world turned upside down, where the normal order of seasons collapsed. By the late 540s, the world very slowly began to recover. Sunlight returned, crops tentatively sprouted once more, populations that had been decimated gradually stabilized. But the scars remained, economically, demographically, and culturally. Entire dynasties fell. Power structures shifted. New empires would rise from the ruins of those that collapsed. We call it the Dark Ages. But perhaps it was nature that darkened the world first. In the centuries that followed, these events faded into the mists of folklore, remembered only in fragments and myth. It is only through the painstaking work of modern climatologists, volcanologists, dendrochronologists, and historians that we have slowly reconstructed the scale of this catastrophe. Ice cores pulled from Greenland and Antarctica now serve as frozen archives, capturing the very aerosols that once dimmed the 6th century sun. High-resolution tree ring studies allow scientists to pinpoint the years of greatest stress. Ancient texts, once dismissed as exaggeration, are now re-examined with new respect, their haunting descriptions aligning eerily with modern data. The likely culprit for the 536 eruption remains under investigation. Some point toward an Icelandic volcano. Others suggest massive eruptions in the Pacific Ring of Fire, possibly in Indonesia. The true source may lie hidden beneath tropical jungles or the ocean floor, its evidence buried under millennia of sediment. I-536 is a reminder that civilization rests on a fragile edge, always vulnerable to forces far beyond our control. In recent years, scholars like Michael McCormick, a medieval historian at Harvard, have declared 536 the worst year to be alive. Not because humanity was at war, but because nature itself had turned hostile on a planetary scale, and yet humanity endured. Against the suffocating gloom, against famine, plague, and political collapse, people adapted, migrated, and survived. The great cities of the world did not vanish entirely. The Byzantine Empire limped onward. The seeds of new kingdoms sprouted in Europe. New technologies, new religions, and new ideas would emerge from the ashes of collapse. In a strange way, this terrible decade served as both an ending and a beginning, a rupture that set the stage for the medieval world to transform. From the darkness, new lights would eventually emerge as the skies slowly cleared and the world found its breath again. New powers began to stir upon the open steppes of Central Asia. From those wind-swept plains would rise an empire built on trade, diplomacy, and mystery, a kingdom that would leave behind as many questions as answers. The Khazar Empire awaits. Some empires carve their names into stone, others leave behind whispers that echo across centuries. Beyond the craggy peaks of the Caucasus, where Europe blends into Asia like shifting sands of forgotten borders, rose a kingdom few have seen, but many have speculated upon: the Khazar Empire. In the early medieval centuries, while Europe still reeled from the collapse of Rome and struggled to redefine itself, a different power quietly expanded its influence across the Eurasian steppe, controlling rivers, trade routes, and diplomacy in ways few empires of its time could rival. Unlike the towering walls of Constantinople or the palaces of Baghdad, the Khazar state left few lasting monuments. Its cities, built from wood and clay, eventually surrendered to wind, rain, and silence. But for nearly 300 years, from the 7th to the 10th century, the Khazars commanded a territory that stretched from the Caspian Sea to the Dnieper River, from the Black Sea to the Volga, acting as a commercial crossroads between East and West, North, and South. Their greatest power was not found in armies alone, but in their mastery of negotiation, tolerance, and mystery. The Khazars were a Turkic people, descendants of the great steppe confederations that had long surged westward. From Central Asia, like their Hunnic predecessors, they excelled at mounted warfare. Their light cavalry could strike swiftly across open plains, rain arrows from horseback, and vanish into grasslands before enemy foot soldiers could even assemble. But unlike many nomadic tribes, the Khazars did not simply raid and retreat. Instead, they built a sophisticated state capable of balancing competing empires on all sides. To their south lay the powerful Byzantine Empire, ever watchful for incursions. To the east stood the Sasanian Persians, and later the rising Arab Caliphate. To the north, Slavic tribes pushed downward along the river corridors. The Khazars' geographic position allowed them to control the crucial Silk Road branch that funneled goods between China, Persia, Byzantium, and Europe. Silk, furs, honey, slaves, spices, and precious metals all flowed through Khazar markets. They acted as brokers of the medieval world, both literally and diplomatically. In a world of religious zeal, the Khazars chose an unexpected path, one that would forever shroud them in scholarly debate. By the 8th century, while their neighbors waged holy wars, the Khazars made a radical decision. According to both Islamic and Jewish sources, and most famously, the 10th century correspondence between the Khazar king and the Spanish Jewish statesman Hasdai ibn Shaprut, the Khazar ruling elite converted to Judaism. Why this small Turkic power adopted Judaism remains a matter of intense scholarly debate. Some argue it was a political strategy, a means to remain neutral between the two dominant religious superpowers pressing against them, Christian Byzantium and Islamic Persia, and later the Caliphates. By adopting Judaism, they positioned themselves as a neutral force that could negotiate with both sides without full submission. Others suggest that Jewish merchants and scholars traveling along the Silk Road played a larger role. Jewish communities flourished across the Islamic world, often serving as intermediaries in trade. As Khazar rulers expanded their commercial networks, alliances with these communities may have offered both practical and spiritual incentives. Regardless of motive, the decision was nearly unprecedented. While Jewish diaspora communities existed across the medieval world, almost no sovereign state outside of ancient Israel had adopted Judaism as its state religion. The Khazars became, in effect, the only Jewish kingdom in medieval Eurasia. Their kingdom became a buffer zone, not of walls, but of ideas. The Khazars governed through a system both flexible and surprisingly modern in its complexity. At the heart of their empire stood Atil, their capital along the Volga River. Described by Arab travelers like Ibn Fadlan, Atil was a cosmopolitan city of wooden houses, marketplaces, and religious diversity. The Khazar ruler, known as the Khagan, was often viewed as a semi-sacred figure, a symbolic head of state who rarely involved himself in daily governance. Real political power rested with the Bek or military commander, who managed both defense and diplomacy. This dual system allowed stability across the Khazar Confederation's many ethnic and religious groups, which included Turkic tribes, Slavs, Alans, Bulgars, and numerous others. In Atil, Muslim traders built mosques. Christian merchants from Byzantium constructed churches. Pagan shrines dotted the countryside. Synagogues stood alongside markets where honey, fur, amber, and silk exchanged hands. The Khazars maintained a delicate but profitable equilibrium, an empire of middlemen, who extracted taxes and tribute from nearly every transaction. But even balance cannot last forever, not when surrounded by empires hungry for dominance. By the 9th and 10th centuries, new powers emerged that would slowly erode Khazar supremacy. From the north came the Rus, Scandinavian traders, and raiders who navigated the river systems of Eastern Europe, establishing trading posts that would later become cities like Kiev and Novgorod. At first, the Khazars managed the Rus threat skillfully, even extracting tribute from these early Norse settlers. The famous Silk Road North passed through Khazar-controlled territory, allowing the Rus to trade with Constantinople and beyond, but only with Khazar permission. However, as the Rus consolidated power, their ambitions grew. With the conversion of Prince Vladimir Themrin to Christianity in 988 AD, the Kievan Rus shifted their alliances southward, aligning more closely with Byzantium. This undermined Khazar control over the lucrative trade corridors. Meanwhile, from the Islamic world, the Abbasid Caliphate and rising regional powers challenged Khazar authority from the east and south. Repeated military conflicts with Arab forces weakened Khazar defenses, forcing costly military campaigns to protect their southern frontiers. By the 10th century, the twilight of the Khazar Empire had begun, slow, quiet, and nearly forgotten. In the mid-10th century, the rising Kievan Rus, led by Prince Sviatoslav the Fiend of Kiev, launched devastating campaigns against Khazar fortresses along the lower Volga. Key cities were burned, tributary tribes defected, trade routes shifted away from Khazar control. By the end of the century, Khazaria, once the mighty broker of Eurasia, had fragmented into regional remnants. Some communities fled eastward into the Caucasus, while others assimilated into the emerging states around them. While Khazaria faded as a political entity, legends of their unique kingdom endured. Jewish communities across Europe and the Middle East whispered stories of a lost Jewish empire on the steppe. Medieval chroniclers speculated about their fate. Some myths even suggested that Khazar descendants later merged with Eastern European Jewish populations, fueling centuries of debate regarding Ashkenazi origins. Even now, the Khazars remain both present and absent, a puzzle trapped between history and legend. In modern times, genetic studies have largely debunked earlier pseudoscientific theories about Khazar ancestry, forming the majority of Ashkenazi Jewry. Instead, evidence points toward diverse roots in the Levant, Europe, and the Mediterranean basin. Yet the Khazars continue to fascinate scholars, conspiracy theorists, and historians alike. Their sudden rise, unique religious conversion, and mysterious fall leave behind more questions than answers. Archaeologists have unearthed Khazar artifacts, burial mounds called kurgans, fragments of jewelry, coins bearing dual religious symbols. But no monumental ruins. Their architecture, built from wood, long surrendered to the elements. Their great cities exist now only in excavated soil and the fragile ink of travelers' reports. Some mysteries endure not because we know too little, but because we suspect they were never meant for us to fully understand. Beneath the brilliant Cretan sun, on an island where myths were born, where the Minotaur once stalked his labyrinth and gods walked hidden among mortals, a humble disk was pulled from the earth, a disk that has haunted archaeologists and linguists for over a century. The year was 1908. The Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier carefully brushed away the ancient dust inside a palace ruin at Phaistos, on the southern side of Crete. What emerged from the ground was not marble nor bronze, but something deceptively simple, a clay disc about 15 centimeters across and 2 centimeters thick, its surface impressed with an intricate spiral of symbols unlike any other found in the ancient world. What Pernier held would soon be known as the Phaistos Disc, and from that day forward, it would occupy a peculiar corner in the study of human language, a riddle without a key. Its surface spins like a cosmic puzzle, a frozen conversation whispered across 4,000 years of silence. The disc contains 241 signs arranged in a continuous spiral on both sides, stamped with 45 distinct symbols. Each figure, carefully pressed into the wet clay using individual seals, represents something both familiar and utterly alien. There are human figures in plumed headdresses, birds with wings spread wide, fish, flowers, shields, ships, arrows, and strange tools. Unlike most ancient scripts, where characters are scratched or carved, these symbols were stamped, suggesting a level of planning and technological sophistication unusual for its time. Radiocarbon dating places the disc's creation roughly between 1850 and 1550 BCE, placing it squarely within the Middle Minoan period, a civilization renowned for its palatial architecture, frescoes, and early writing systems like Linear A, itself largely undeciphered. Yet the Phaistos Disc stands apart even from these mysteries. Who made it? Why was it created? And why do no other examples exist? Unlike cuneiform tablets or Egyptian papyri, which number in the thousands, the Phaistos Disc remains alone. No copies, no similar artifacts, no alternate versions. In over a century of excavation across Crete and the broader Aegean, nothing else quite like it has ever been found. This singularity is part of its haunting appeal. Was it a prototype, a ritual object, a message carried from a distant land? Its uniqueness raises as many questions as its symbols. Some scholars argue that the disc may not even belong to the Minoan cultural sphere, but was perhaps brought to Crete by traders, emissaries, or exiles from unknown regions. The possibility of it being a foreign artifact, created elsewhere and deposited in Phaistos by chance or ceremony, remains open. The greatest enigma lies not in the symbols themselves, but in the absence of context. Most ancient scripts survive because of repetition. Thousands of hieroglyphs, countless cuneiform tablets, and bilingual inscriptions like the Rosetta Stone allow linguists to triangulate meaning, compare patterns, and decode lost tongues. The Phaistos Disc offers no such luxury. With only 45 unique symbols and just over 240 total impressions, the sample is painfully small. This scarcity renders most decipherment techniques ineffective. Frequency analysis, a staple in code breaking, collapses under so few data points. Nevertheless, dozens of scholars, hobbyists, and theorists have proposed translations ranging from plausible to wildly speculative. Every attempted translation says as much about us as it does about the disc. One theory, advanced by linguist Jean Fauconneau, suggests the disc encodes an early form of Greek, perhaps a Proto-Ionic dialect. Fauconneau interpreted some symbols as syllabic representations, constructing a narrative about religious or ceremonial practices. Others, such as Gareth Owens of the Technological Educational Institute of Crete, have proposed the disc contains a hymn to a mother goddess, possibly related to the fertility cults known to exist in Minoan religion. Owens believes certain repeated phrases suggest invocations to divine figures, drawing parallels with linear A vocabulary. However, mainstream academia remains skeptical. The data remains too thin, the interpretations too speculative. Each translation seems to fit its author's bias more than any hard linguistic certainty. The disc has also attracted voices from the fringe, theorists who see not language, but something far more exotic. Some suggest the disc encodes astronomical data, a primitive calendar or star chart hidden beneath its spiral. Others propose mathematical formulas, magical incantations, or musical notation. In more speculative circles, the disc has even been linked to lost civilizations, Atlantis, extraterrestrial contact, or survivors of prehistoric cataclysms whose records vanished in ancient floods. Yet, despite the lure of these grand narratives, most serious scholars return to the same frustrating truth. Without a comparative corpus, even the best theories remain little more than educated guesswork. Perhaps its greatest secret lies not in what it says, but in how it was made. The manufacturing method of the Phaistos Disc is itself unusual. Each symbol was not hand-carved, but stamped into the clay with individual dies, an early form of movable type. This suggests not only planning, but the existence of a standardized set of stamps, implying literacy and bureaucratic systems far more advanced than previously assumed for the period. Could this be the earliest surviving example of printing technology? Some argue yes. If true, it would predate Gutenberg's press by over 3 millennia, standing as a technological anomaly. The question then emerges, why was this technique not more widely adopted? Why does no other Minoan artifact show similar stamping? Was this an isolated experiment? The prototype of a system that failed to gain traction? Or perhaps a ceremonial piece made uniquely for one occasion, one message, or one ritual? Its spiral may echo not only language, but time itself. Some scholars suggest that the disc's spiral layout may reflect more than simple artistic preference. The spiral was a sacred symbol across numerous Mediterranean and Near Eastern cultures, representing cyclical time, rebirth, and the eternal. Dance of nature's forces. Could the disc represent a cyclical chant, a ritual prayer spoken in looping rhythms? Was it read from the center outward or from the edge inward? The direction of reading remains debated, each possibility altering the proposed syntax entirely. The Phaistos Disc remains both present and distant, like a voice speaking softly, behind thick glass. Today the disc rests securely in the Heraclean Archaeological Museum, protected from light, heat, and the persistent breath of curious visitors. Behind its glass case, it exerts a quiet gravitational pull, drawing scholars and tourists alike into its orbit of unanswered questions. The museum lights cast soft reflections upon its surface, highlighting the gentle curvature of its baked clay, the depth of each impression, the slight imperfections that betray the human hands that once pressed each symbol into wet earth. As one stares, a strange calm settles. The symbols begin to feel familiar and foreign simultaneously. They whisper possibilities without confirming any of them, the very essence of an enduring mystery. Some puzzles were perhaps never meant to be solved, not because they are unsolvable, but because they ask better questions than answers. In the century since its discovery, the Phaistos Disc has resisted every method, every discipline, every decoding effort. And yet, in that resistance, it offers something rare, a glimpse into how little we know and how vast the ancient world truly was. It remains, in many ways, the perfect mystery, small enough to hold in two hands, yet vast enough to fill entire bookshelves with speculation. And so, as we gently leave the silent spiral of Phaistos behind, our journey moves toward yet another artifact, one that gazes not inward like the spiral, but outward toward the stars. On a German hillside, buried beneath centuries of earth, a bronze disk would emerge, a celestial map etched in gold. The Nebra Sky Disk awaits. Long before telescopes pierced the heavens, ancient hands traced the stars with quiet reverence. The night sky has always whispered to humankind. Long before charts or calendars, before alphabets or empires, the heavens served as the oldest library, a spinning dome of silent stories. Beneath its unblinking gaze, our ancestors tracked the seasons, measured time, and sought answers in patterns of distant light. But in 1999, buried beneath a German hillside near the town of Nebra, archaeologists unearthed an artifact that seemed to collapse vast stretches of time into a single breath. A thin bronze disk inlaid with gold. Unlike anything previously discovered, the Nebra Sky Disk, as it would be named, instantly became one of the most mysterious and significant finds in the study of prehistoric astronomy. A map of the heavens, frozen in metal, quietly rewriting our understanding of Europe's ancient past. It is not merely an object, but a conversation across 3,600 years. The disk measures just over 30 centimeters across, its weathered green patina broken by brilliant gold inlays that shimmer against the muted bronze. On its face are 7 golden dots, believed to represent the Pleiades star cluster, accompanied by a large circular sun or full moon, a crescent moon, and 2 curved gold arcs along its sides, likely marking the horizon of the solstices. Toward its base lies a thin golden arc, interpreted by many as a sunboat, a motif found in various ancient mythologies, symbolizing the journey of the sun across the sky and into the underworld. Radiocarbon dating of associated organic materials and metallurgical analysis places the disk's creation around 1600 BCE, during Europe's Bronze Age, predating even Thos, Greek astronomers who would later claim the stars for their own philosophies. The disk whispers of a forgotten science, one we only glimpsed in its burial. Its discovery was as unlikely as its survival. The Nebra Sky Disk was unearthed not by professional archaeologists, but by illicit treasure hunters using metal detectors in Germany's Ziegelrode forest. Attempting to sell their find on the black market, they were eventually intercepted by authorities, allowing scholars to rescue the artifact before it vanished into private collections. Since its recovery, the disk has offered both illumination and mystery. Its precise purpose remains debated. Was it a portable star map, a ritual object, an educational tool for early astronomers, or perhaps a sacred artifact blending science with mythology? The 7 dots representing the Pleiades suggest not only observational astronomy but also links to agricultural calendars. In many ancient cultures, the first appearance of the Pleiades at dawn signaled planting or harvest times, a celestial clock guiding life on Earth. Its design reflects not random decoration but deliberate knowledge, a lost understanding of cycles older than empire. The two golden arcs flanking its sides correspond almost exactly to the angle of the solstices at the latitude of Nebra. They frame the sun's extreme positions at midsummer and midwinter, marking the longest and shortest days of the year. Such precision suggests that its makers possessed not just general observations, but a detailed empirical understanding of celestial mechanics, knowledge long presumed absent in prehistoric Central Europe. In this, the disc challenges long-standing assumptions about the intellectual landscape of Bronze Age Europe. While civilizations like Egypt, Mesopotamia, and China recorded complex astronomical data, Europe was often dismissed as primitive by comparison. The Nebra Sky Disk stands as silent contradiction, proof that sophisticated skywatchers once gazed upward from German soil, carefully recording the cosmic rhythms above. But where did this knowledge come from, and where did it go? The disk appears to belong to the broader cultural sphere of the Unetice culture, a Bronze Age society occupying Central Europe around 2300 to 1600 BCE. The Unetice left behind rich burial mounds, metalwork, and evidence of extensive trade networks that stretched from the Baltic to the Mediterranean. But the sky disk remains unique. No other object of its kind has surfaced from Unetice sites or neighboring cultures. Was it the product of a single workshop, the commission of a priestly elite, a standalone experiment in astronomical representation? Its materials, too, tell a story of wide connections. Analysis shows that the bronze came from Austrian ores, the gold from Cornwall in England, and the tin from the distant Erzgebirge Mountains. This suggests not an isolated village crafting in secret, but a society deeply integrated into the complex trade networks of prehistoric Europe. Its journey through time may be as strange as its creation. The disk was buried not as a fresh artifact, but after centuries of use. Scholars believe it underwent multiple modifications over generations. Tiny perforations suggest it was once mounted or displayed, and adjustments to its gold inlays hint at evolving knowledge or ritual practice. It is possible the disk passed through many hands, astronomers, priests, rulers, each inheriting and adapting its function as oral traditions faded and knowledge transformed into myth. Eventually, it was carefully placed beneath the earth, perhaps as an offering, a burial of fading wisdom, or a desperate preservation attempt as its meaning slipped from collective memory. Modern scholars have only begun to trace its whispers. The disk now resides in the State Museum of Prehistory in Halle, Germany, where it draws researchers, linguists, astronomers, and philosophers alike, each hoping to pull new meaning from its quiet surface. In 2010, the disk was granted protected status by UNESCO, recognized as one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Its influence ripples far beyond academic journals, inspiring books, documentaries, and even modern art. Yet even now, fundamental questions remain unresolved. Was this the product of a lost astronomical tradition that briefly flickered and vanished? Was it a tool for teaching young sky watchers the cycles of the heavens? Or was it a sacred object used in rituals meant to align the rhythms of humanity with those of the cosmos? The Nebra Sky Disk reminds us that knowledge is not always linear, that light can be forgotten, only to be rediscovered millennia later. What is most humbling about the disk is not simply its age, but its fragility, how easily it could have been lost forever. Had the looters succeeded, the disk might have disappeared into private hands, its story untold. Instead, it now glows softly beneath museum lights, its golden stars still shimmering across the face of time. A frozen moment when ancient humans reached for the heavens and recorded what they saw with astonishing clarity. Its spiral echoes the ancient truth whispered by every civilization, that beneath the vast sky we are small, yet capable of great wonder. And as we stare into the stars, Perhaps they too stare back, their ancient light still crossing time to reach us. The Nebra Sky Disk closes our journey through some of history's most perplexing mysteries. Like the Piri Reis Map, the Codex Gigas, the Shroud of Turin, and the countless other enigmas we've explored, it stands not as an answer, but as an invitation, an open door into the unknown. In their silence, these artifacts remind us that history is not a fixed path, but a shifting landscape of forgotten wisdom, misplaced knowledge, and brief glimpses of brilliance lost to time. And now, dear traveler of hidden histories, as we gently close the final chapter of tonight's journey, let your mind drift beyond these ancient echoes. The riddles remain softly humming beneath the surface of time, but for now, you may release them. Let your breath slow. Let your body soften into the quiet embrace of sleep. For tonight, the stars above still whisper as they have whispered. For millennia, keeping watch as you gently slip into peaceful rest. Good night, and sleep well.